So hey, it's Jason. Before you watch this video, I just want to make a few corrections that you're going to see. Specifically the fuse placement. I said the 5th spot over, but you want it to be the 2nd spot over, which is going to actually be for the fuel pump. And the reason why is when you turn the ignition, that's when you want this to engage, the relay and the second battery and all of that. And it will only engage on that ignition pool, the actual fuel pump. So the instructions that came with the kit, it is for an L322. Everything else is identical, but the 2003 panel in the back turns out to be a little bit different. So let me go ahead and show you what I'm talking about here. So anywhere in the video, when I say 5th position, in my 2003 Land Rover, Range Rover, L322, I'm using now the 2nd position, which is for the fuel pump. I was thinking about this yesterday, and if you look in the manual, before 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th was number 82, and 82 was for a blower. So what I've done is I've switched it to be for the fuel pump. It's a 25 amp fuse number 85. And that's exactly where I told you your battery terminal hookup, 1, 2 over is the fuel pump. So just keep in mind, anywhere that I said to put it on the 5th spot over, it may be okay. The most important thing is just making sure that it's a fuse that only activates when the ignition is on. And some other things I learned about this is if your battery gets below 10 volts, the gentleman that sold it to me said that it probably won't function. So this is not going to be a fix if you have a parasitic battery draw. Meaning if you have a battery that's going down to 9 volts or whatever, which is effectively considered a dead battery because something's running. This is intended to give you full voltage. So if you're a little bit below 12 volts, it will give you full voltage when you turn the ignition, which is going to help prohibit some of those, trans failsafe errors and other funky things that you might see, suspension faults on the L322 when the battery isn't perfectly 12.5 volts or whatever. So this is going to also enable you to hook up other things like a fridge in the back or a plug. I'm going to use it for plugs so my son can plug things in, or I can plug a laptop in to charge. I put a fan back there for my dog, all of that stuff. So a few tips. 1, make sure the fuse you use only turns on when you turn the ignition, because that's when you want the second battery to cut on. 2, realize that this isn't going to solve if your battery goes completely flat, your car starting. You can use this battery to get it started by jumpering the relay, so then it will draw from this battery. But if that battery up front is completely dead, the relay is not going to do its magic, and it's not going to help when ignition start. So keep that in mind. And then, 3, realize why you're doing this, right? It's not just a cool factor. I'm doing it because when I turn the ignition, I want to have 100% charge every time to alleviate any of those demons that happen on the L322 related to charge. So just bear in mind when you go through this video, it's lengthy, it's a very, very deep tech step-by-step. As I did this, I was learning things. Be patient, pay attention to where you put the fuse, make sure it's only going to be one that turns with the ignition. You might have to make some slight modifications. You might have to chisel a little bit of plastic out like I did, and that's it. I mean, otherwise everything will work as you have intended. So sorry for adding more minutes to the front of this video, but I thought it was important to give that preamble because I don't want you watching it plugging into a fuse that isn't serving the sole purpose of what it should be at ignition start, and you thinking it's hooked up the way you have it. So big shout out to Luke at luxurylandroverupgrades.com. That's helped me with this because I'm not a mechanic, I'm not an electrician, but he's helped me kind of sort a few different things. So hope this video is helpful for whomever watches. Let's go ahead and hop into it. To be quite frank, a backup and something I drive in the snow over my 2007, and it was a project. I got it for free and fixed it. But the battery, it would die. because these things always have electronics that run even when they're sleeping. So this is a second battery extender, so it's going to enable me to install a secondary battery in the back. This is from Luxury Range Rover Upgrades out of the UK. 89 bucks. I am going to order another fuse, so if this pops I have a backup on hand. I'm going to show how I plan to install this and what I plan to do. And a few folks have used the same battery that's under the hood in the back here to do it. This little cubby you can pull out. Let's put that shelf up here. I'm going to pull the tire cover off. And what I'm hoping to do is fit the battery in here. And you're probably thinking, my goodness, it won't fit in that little tiny cubby. Well, the cubby comes out, and there's a lot more space in here than it's cut for. And supposedly, this plastic will come out pretty easily. And then that's going to enable me over here to hook all of my devices and then run the battery down into here. So effectively what's going to happen is everything will be hooked up like so, and the battery will run down there. But what I want to do is show or demonstrate, and you can learn with me, how I intend to get this out to make the battery fit. So that's going to be my little project today, and as I go I'll document what I'm doing. It looks like there's just a few bolts here. I see one back here, and I'm willing to bet there's probably something under here. So let me get to work and see what I can do by loosening up a few items to get this loose. Okay, so using a 10mm, I had one in here and one back there. Using an Allen wrench, I've loosened up the cargo tie down. I'm going to set that aside because I believe I'm going to need to remove this in order to get to another bolt or something, because this seems like something's holding it in back there. So these little clips that were in here, you can see how they have little indentations. They basically go in and then they twist to lock into place. So you just want to turn them to the left, and that will get this panel out. So I'm going to pop this out, lay that aside, try not to lose any pieces. And see what, so this is good here. It wants to come right out. And then it looks like it's just something back here holding it down. So let me go ahead and loosen these up and see what's going on. So actually back here, it kind of hooks on these lips. So I just lifted it up. And that looks like the only place it's being held down now is right there. So I need to pop that up with a screwdriver and see if it's a screw to loosen. It's actually just a piece of plastic back here, and it looks like it's going to want to start coming out now. Let me set this plastic bit aside, and I do think this is going to need to stay out. I had it out previously. Put that up there. I'm going to need both hands, but it looks like it's going to want to come out here now, as you can see. So let me get my both hands here and give it a lift. So all I had to do was undo this pin, and then it was able to slide out from underneath of it. And you can see that now the plastic is removed. So in theory, this looks like plenty of room for a battery, height and width. And then this plastic would just go back over top. So that way you're not going to lose any space in the boot when you put that new battery in there. So I'm going to go ahead and begin to fit the actual cables, and then I'll get the battery and I'll place the battery in. I don't have the battery yet. Okay, so everything's all ready to begin doing this. So I would just lay out your second battery connector. And this is the main battery lead, the red one. That's going to be 10 millimeters that we're going to loosen up. And just behind it is a screw right there that this is going to sit on and nest, just like so. And you're going to want to use a little nut to secure it. Mine doesn't have a nut in the kit, so I'll use one of my own. So now I have that piece fitted. You can see right there with a nut, and it's nice and secure. Looks like it always should have been there, but you're going to have to supply the nut. My kit did not come with one. So now with this relay installed, I'm going to want to add my battery connector on top of the one from the car, which would be 10 millimeters. So get 10 millimeters in there, and then just lay mine from the relay directly on top. So undo that nut with a 10 millimeter, and then lay the this from the kit coming out of the relay into that. So let me go ahead and do that. So I've undid the 10 millimeter. You can see I'm just setting it right over top the other one, and then I'm going to go ahead and tighten it back up. Okay, so it's all in there nice and tight. I'll probably tuck this behind here like so when I put the cover back on, but it's laying right over top. The relay is nice and in place, so I can proceed to the next step, which is probably hooking up the ground and plugging the fuse in. Okay, so the next step is you have this fuse relay. So the instructions say count over 5 spots. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pop that fuse out, put this in, and then that will be the fuse, presumably for the relay and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and pop out the 5th fuse over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I have my fuses hooked up. So I'm going to be able to put this back in the 5th spot. So now the piggyback holder is in, nice and secure, on the 5th spot over, with all the fuses hooked up. So now we need to hook the ground up. So if you're going in, you're going to look for this white plug, and you can see right back here, they're advising to use this. It's 10 millimeters. Pull it out and chip some of the paint off of it, and it provides a nice ground to the chassis. So I'm going to loosen this up with the 10 mil and chip some of the paint off to get to bare metal. So just a slight correction, the ground that you're going to be using is actually 8 millimeters, not 10. So get in there and loosen that up with an 8 millimeter. So what I've done is, you can see I've just scored it a little bit to try to get the bare metal where the bolt's going to go back in. I'll take off a little bit more, and then I can hook the ground back up. This is the panel that's holding all those fuses in, by the way, so don't lose that bolt. So to get down to bare metal, I just used a flathead screwdriver and just scraped it a little bit more. Then you're going to take that ground and put back with the 10 millimeter bolt. Everything at that point is hooked up. Do not touch these together. I have this one laying against the tire, this one here, but when I fit everything back, I'm going to be very careful to keep these separate. If these touch, you're going to short, and you're going to cause a big electrical issue. I'm not going to be able to do the battery all-in-one job because I got to go pick it up. So I'm going to keep it disassembled like this until I pick up the battery tomorrow morning to put everything back. So let's go ahead and hook up the ground and then I'll show what it looks like. Okay, so fuse jumper's in, relay is in, main battery connection's in, ground is in and secure. So now that just leaves me with the terminals for the battery. So what I'm going to do is get the battery tomorrow, put it in here, hook the battery up, and I should be good to go. Make sure these don't touch. Once the battery's in, I'll put that piece of plastic back on top, tighten it, put the plastic pin back, put the carpet back down, and tighten all this up, and then it'll be a clean install. So next step, which will be immediately in this video, but it's going to be a different day, is going to be putting the battery. Okay, so I have this battery. This is the same battery that is under the hood or the bonnet, if that's what you want to call it. And this is a Napa Legend. It's about a $260 battery, but if you buy it from Napa, use AAA, you get a 10% discount. Everything's removed. Don't worry about that liquid looking stuff in there. I just sprayed some peppermint oil because of mice. I figured it wouldn't hurt to hit those wires with some peppermint oil. I'm going to place the battery, and I'm told this bad boy should fit, but it's going to be a snug fit for sure. So let me lift it and get it in there. I'm probably going to have to tuck these cables back just a little bit farther, so it doesn't sit on top of them. Because it's secured right there, I'm going to probably have to push that back farther. Okay, so the battery's placed. This loom that was back here, wire loom, I had to cut and push it really far back. And I don't know if you can see in there, but it goes right behind the battery. So the battery is sitting on the floor and not the wire loom. And it's nice and secure, but what a tight fit. So I'm going to connect the battery, and I'm hoping I have enough clearance to get everything popped back on with this size of battery back here. Okay, you can see I made a change. I flipped the battery because it was much easier to get the positive and negative connectors on with them up front. And I didn't want the connectors too close to that wire loom, so it's a little more protected back here. And then I tucked the wires behind, and now I can go about fitting the components back on. But before I do so, I'm going to give it a start and see and make sure everything works. All right, so I'm in the 2003 Land Rover Range Rover. I've just cranked it. Everything starts as I would expect. I don't see anything too crazy happening back here. So I'm going to keep an eye on everything just to make sure nothing bad happens. But so far everything looks okay. Okay, so I'm starting to put everything back in. I had the plastic tray. All this is nice and tidy. But this is not fitting flush. Okay, so I pulled the battery back out, and I think I know why it's not sitting. You have these little screws that are coming out of the floor, which were there holding the wire loom down. So I'm going to go ahead and try to remove those because they're coming up about that much in the back. And I believe that is... Okay, so I made some more changes. I pulled the battery up. The little screws that were on the base, I was able to get moved just enough. Admittedly, I just bent them just a little bit so that way the battery would get in front of them. I'm not using them anymore. They were just what was hooked to this wire loom. And instead of having the wire loom in the back, I put it in the front, and I've tucked it in front of the battery. And I've made sure that these plastic clamps are keeping it away. So I think this is a fairly safe, tidy install. And I'm hoping when I put this stuff back together, I'll be able to get the side panel up. So let me go ahead and give that a go. Okay, with those slight modifications, everything fit. The battery's back where it should be. The battery's where it should be. All the cargo covers are back. I put the little luggage straps down. This fits, but just not perfect. You can see up here, but it won't go anywhere. But it's not as snug just because it still is lifted on that side. But then you can see underneath we have the battery. If I need to access the fuse, all I got to do is pull this down, and you can see the fuse right there. I can view it. If you have to take the battery out, kind of a pain, because you would have to undo everything to lift it out. I've only secured this with 2 of the 3 bolts, but from my understanding, if this battery doesn't function, it's still not going to prohibit the car from starting, so it should be just fine. But theoretically, this would be getting recharged just like the main battery by way of the alternator. So it's a very tidy and clean install. I'm very happy with the way that it all went in, and I did not lose any space in the boot. So if you're going to do this project, it's not difficult, but it requires patience, and you might run into a few interesting quirks like I did. But now I have a dual battery setup on my 2003 Land Rover Range Rover L322. I hope this was helpful, and I hope it gave you some ideas. And if you have a better way to do this, let me know. Check out my blog, www.jams.net. Thanks for tuning in.